In 2006, there was a movie that was released called Thank You for Smoking. It's about a spin doctor or a tobacco lobbyist who works for the tobacco industry. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, here are a couple of clips.
I speak on behalf of cigarettes.
My mom used to smoke. She says that cigarettes kill.
Really? Now, is your mommy a doctor?
No.
A scientific researcher of some kind?
No.
Well, she doesn't exactly sound like a credible expert now, does she? How on earth would big tobacco profit off of the loss of this young man? It's in our best interest to keep Robin alive and smoking.
That's ludicrous.
Let me tell you something. There is nothing more important than America's children.
Now what you just saw is called putting lipstick on a pig, where you take something of a bad or false nature and you give it a spin to make it appear better or more acceptable than it actually is. It's just camouflage that hides the true nature of the product with fancy, neat packaging. It's what spin doctors do. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Christian apologetics, it's the exact same thing. Apologetics is a branch of philosophy that tasks itself with defending the Bible by using philosophy. And as you're about to see, it's just pure spin through and through. Now, I'm going to show you Ravi Zacharias. In my opinion, he outshines the infamous William Lane Craig and others by his incredible verbose nature and elongated philosophical jargon-filled talk. His technique is to answer questions with so much jargon, anecdotes, and long-winded proses that it is almost impossible to interpret on face value. Now, I literally listened to over 24 hours of his talks. So what you are about to see is the most condensed version I could present to you that would spare you his long-winded windbag nature, but also give you his best argument for Christianity, at least according to him. So where you see a hasty edit or I cut him off quickly, it's not that I'm avoiding something he said that I don't want you to hear. It's just that I'm sparing you him going nowhere, as is often the case. So I edited him to get to the damn point. Okay, now, if you're an atheist, I want to take this opportunity to challenge you. You know, it's not all Banana Man and Westboro Baptist Church out there. Let's take it up a notch in difficulty level. How many fallacies can you spot? How much of the spinning can you unspin? Who can entangle the web they're about to see? Let's see how many of my fellow atheists can actually see through all the philosophical magic tricks that Ravi's going to put in your way.
Our next guest this evening is one of my very favorite men to listen to because he talks about truth in such a wonderful and understandable way. When it comes to clear thinking, a brilliant mind, and an articulate tongue, God gave us Ravi Zacharias. You know, the opponents of the Christian faith are coming out with both barrels loaded. I mean, they're coming out with all they've got.
You've hit the nail on the head there. These are the new brands of what I call hate theists. It's the combination of intense hostility with twisted facts. Facts are not self-interpreting. And when you look at the way the atheists are operating, be it Samuel Harris or Richard Dawkins or Daniel Dennett or Christopher Hitchens, you know, 3 of the top 10 best-selling books in the New York Times a few months ago, 3 were written by vociferous atheists. They are hostile. They are armed for battle. You know, I lecture at Oxford University 3 times a year. I'm a senior research fellow there. Although I live in Atlanta, I go to Oxford and lecture there regularly. Richard Dawkins lectures out of there. And when I was there a couple of months ago, there was a lead article by him asking actually for Oxford to consider not admitting students who believed in an intelligent designer as the source of creation. The irony of his comment was that he is lecturing in a university whose motto is "The Lord is my light." And that very day that I was to begin my lectureship, the student body president of one of the most prestigious colleges at Oxford, Balliol College, took his own life, about 20 or 21 years old. So with all of this sophisticated knowledge and double fist hitting out at Christianity in particular, these atheists have really no answers to give to young men and women who are looking for purpose and meaning in life.
Richard Dawkins and others were on the Mall in Washington, D.C. for their Rally for Reason, an atheist march. 10,000 showed up. And Dawkins told the crowd they should ridicule religious people. Let me quote him. He says, "Mock them, ridicule them in public, Their beliefs are insane, therefore they should be ridiculed with contempt.
You know, when I heard that and read this, I read it hours before my talk at the University of Hawaii. I began my talk by saying I support what Dawkins says, that we should ridicule people with religious belief. And I would recommend that he begin that statement in Saudi Arabia and let him start. And the audience just roared, you know, so there was maybe nasty comment to make. He is really complimenting this society of Christians by saying things like that because he can say it with impunity.
Let me just tell you something. For hundreds and thousands of years, this kind of discussion would have been in most places impossible to have, or Sam and I would have been having it at the risk of our lives. Religion now comes to us in this smiley face, ingratiating way, because it's had to give so much ground, and because we know so much more. But you've no right to forget the way it behaved when it was strong, and when it really did believe that it had God on its side.
I dare him to go to Saudi and do that. I dare him to go to Iran and do that. The least he will find out is that not all religions are created equal. If he's telling us our ideas are insane, what does mocking do? If it's an insane idea, what does mocking really do?
In what way does that help the spread of reason?
Oh, well, I think mockery of religion is one of the most essential things, because to demystify supposedly holy texts that are dictated by God and show that they are man-made, what you have to show their internal inconsistencies and absurdities. And one of the beginnings of human emancipation is the ability to laugh at authority. It's an indispensable thing.
So even if he is taken practically, I dare him to do it in a counter perspective like Islam. If he is doing it equivocatingly, then it is not nothing, it is something. If he is mocking something insane, then the insanity actually lies on the side of the mocker. Everything he calls for there violates reason. But this shows you who Dawkins is. He is driven by hate. And that's why many respected atheists want to separate themselves from him. Even secular thinkers took issue with that statement of his and called him to task on it. Dawkins is an angry man, and one day that anger will catch up with him. The atheist has no hope. There's no hope beyond the grave. When life comes to an end, it's gone. It's finished like a vapor. The hope in atheism is not there. It's oblivion, nothingness, straying through an infinite nothing, no up or down, lanterns in the nighttime hours, noise of grave diggers. Without God, there's no moral framework. There's no meaning, no ultimate meaning, no hope. And lastly, there's no recovery. If you rejected him and you turn out to be wrong, that was a huge gamble you took in life. If you believed in him and you were wrong, nothing doesn't want to be something. That's what Pascal said in his wager.
One of my closest friends is an atheist, and I've asked her why she is, and she told me that she's read the doctrines of many theologies, including Christianity. And as soon as she got to the part in the Bible where she read about Adam and Eve, and they said, or it said, that woman shall suffer the pain of childbirth for the sin of Eve, she told me, I stopped reading because I refuse to believe in something that doesn't believe in me. What would be your response to her?
When a person rejects a certain worldview, you have to respect, if they're being honest, why they reject it. So when a woman or a man says they are denying the existence of God, what are they affirming in its place? She is actually affirming that this God or religion is not true. Atheism is. But if atheism is true, she has no value. If atheism is true, there's not even a point of reference for her worth. The question of morality, the question of meaning, and the question of hope, that these are meaningless questions in a purely deterministic, material, naturalistic universe. Why do we talk of good and evil if we are descendants from primordial slime? I say that for the naturalist, even the questions ultimately don't make sense. Why am I not an atheist? I simply cannot find a rationally defensible way for moral reasoning. And the fact of the matter is, we are at our core moral beings. Those who deny God's existence, what do they invoke? Too much of evil and suffering. On what basis? How do they even arrive at that? And when you raise the question of the nature of good, you have to start wondering, how do you really arrive at the reality of good and evil when there is no God? Do you know what Richard Dawkins has now come up with? Dawkins has gone so far as to say we have to deny the reality of evil if our argument is going to stay. So he actually denies there is any such thing as evil. I was flying out of a country where I sat next to a woman who rescues women and children from abuse. I won't name the country, but she told me, she was a Dutch lady. I said, were you successful? She said, I saw the worst thing I saw last night. She said, in this area of city called Snake Alley, men come at night, they consume a concoction of snake's blood and hard liquor. It ravages the mind, and then whatever they want, they are given. She said, I rescued an 18-month-old baby girl from the arms of this man who was sexually plundering her, because that's what he wanted under the influence of snake's blood and hard liquor. Mr. Dawkins, is that evil? Can you imagine there walk human beings for whom that is pleasure? Is this the ravaging of just the brain or the ravaging of the soul? Dawkins says, no, we're dancing to our DNA. Is that what he was doing? It's easy to come up and say, God is dead, God doesn't exist. How then do you make any moral pronouncements of any kind? Read Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith. Read his other book, A Letter to a Christian Nation, where he's challenging America to shred this vestige of God talk and God ideas. When you say something is evil, you assume something is good. When you assume something is good, you assume there's a moral law by which to differentiate between good and evil. And if you assume a moral law, you must ultimately posit a moral lawgiver. But that's whom the question is often trying to disprove and not prove. Because if there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. The question really self-destructs in terms of an objectivity, an objective rule by which to measure good and evil. It's very important to notice that the question in fact affirms that a moral framework exists in life. As I had read in the life of Nietzsche, and done all of the reading about the Third Reich and so on, the impact that Nietzsche's philosophy had on Adolf Hitler. And Hitler, of course, had distributed Nietzsche's writings to Mussolini and to Stalin, whom historians brand the three devils of the 20th century. And I began to recognize how a philosophy, please get me clearly here now, I am not saying that every atheist is compelled to move in this direction. Absolutely not. There are many morally minded atheists, and we will get to the options they do give to us. But the fact of the matter is, when you do lock God out of it, it opens up the terrain for a logical outworking of inventing your own ethic and living by it and justifying it by whatever pragmatism you can bring into it. And the fact of the matter is, you see this again and again. When, for example, at the judgments were taking place at Nuremberg, when somebody was asked about why he had consented to such horrendous, heinous evil, and his answer was that he was operating according to the law of the land, the very answers that Eichmann gave at his trial in the early 60s, although it's more than 2 decades later. Many, an extreme humanist could be a very, very good person, morally good. That is the question is not whether an atheist can be a good person or not. The question is there is no rationally irreducible extension of reason to do that, except pragmatically that you want to live in peace. But that is assuming that peace is a good thing. That's only a matter of survival.
Some of the most ethical, some of the finest people I know, the most compassionate, the highest people with the highest ideals I know are atheists.
Absolutely. No one has ever said that they are not. The question is, there is no rationally compelling reason for them to be ethical. That's the first point. And the second point is, how did you even arrive at the conclusion that it is ethical to be ethical? Where is the point of reference?
Well, I can't answer for an atheist where that point of reference is, but perhaps in their hearts they found it necessary to be ethical, to treat people compassionately without reference to belief in God.
But from the rational point of view, if a person comes to the opposite conclusion, how does one debate between the two? To just say out of my heart, that was Bertrand Russell's position. He operated on the basis of emotivism and feeling. Mm-hmm. And no matter how lofty it sounds, it's an irrational position, Fred, and that's what I'm saying. And for all of those who want moral reasoning, I ask you, if death is the end, when that moment comes, there's ultimately no difference between a Mother Teresa and an Adolf Hitler. If there's no justice, if there's no judgment, ultimately there is really no comma or punctuation mark. It's a full stop. How does one really hold to a worldview where such are the ramifications of huge differences in lifestyles and values and ethics? I stood behind Mother Teresa on 2 or 3 occasions, but I remember this diminutive woman with all of her limited physical capacity, living with this little white sari around her. Sure, when she died, there were only 3 saris in her trunk. That's all she had. A woman who gave herself to such incredible sacrifice. And what does Hitchens do with a life like that? Writes a vulgarly titled book called The Missionary Position. That's all he had to say about a woman like that.
I'm Christopher Hitchens, and I'm the author of a book called The Missionary Position, which investigates Mother Teresa. I would describe Mother Teresa as a fraud, a fanatic, and a fundamentalist. Everything everybody thinks they know about her is false. Not just most of the things, all the things. It must be the most single successful emotional con job of the 20th century.
My question is it possible for a man or a woman to live a sincere Christian life as a homosexual?
Sex is a sacred gift of God. A disposition or a proclivity does not justify expressing that disposition and that proclivity. That goes across the board for all sexuality. When God created mankind and womankind, it was His plan, not our plan. It is extraordinary to me what He said. He said it is not good for a man to live alone. Well, man wasn't living alone. God was with him. Why did He say that? He created the mystique and the majesty and the charm and the complementary nature of womankind in a way that made it possible for her to meet His emotional needs that God Himself put only within her. Outside of Himself, from Himself, in her, in that complementariness. So you take that sacred commitment, it is a design by God.
Is evolution compatible with Scripture, with the God of the Bible?
No, that's not compatible with the Bible, okay? Second of all, it's not compatible with science. Okay?
Evolution is not compatible with Christianity, period. The more you understand Christianity, the more you understand evolution, you'll see the incompatibility.
He's right, they're right. I'm with them. But you know, the irony of it is, as these men well know, today for any academics in the arena to even say anything like that is to risk completely being an outcast. That's right. Very few philosophies in the world are as bigoted as liberalism. When God created mankind and womankind, it was His plan, not our plan.
It's hard to find a liberal.
Liberalism is the most bigoted philosophy around today. I made that comment at an open forum, and I got a letter from a congressman, senator, I don't remember his name, and he took issue with me. He was a liberal, and he was very upset with this statement. I said, if you truly are a liberal, tell me why it is that in all of the mainline divinity schools, when the conservatives were in control, students were taught what the counter-perspective is. Now you try to get a conservative scholar into these liberal divinity schools. See the bigotry that comes through. Look at the intelligent design idea, the way it's being hit as if it's something of imbecilic value, and yet there are some bright minds who are trying to, speak out on it. But then if you find out that Anthony Flew has rejected atheism because it's no longer tenable, you don't read it anywhere in any one of their journals because it's an embarrassment to them. They don't publish all those things. The same thing with evolution here. It's the emperor has no clothes.
Just to amplify that for a moment, I appreciate you raising that issue, because when you think about, for instance, intelligent design.
And if you take, Jim, just the composition of the enzyme in the human component, the enzyme, which is the building block of the gene, and the gene the building block of the cell, the possibility of the human enzyme coming together by random, says Vikram Singhi, professor of applied mathematics at Cardiff in Wales, the possibility of that happening by chance is 1 in 10 to the power of 40,000. That's more than the number of atoms in this universe.
That's amazing.
It is time-wise and mathematically, the possibility is 0. However you section physical reality, you take the physical universe as you see it, however you slice it down to its minutest form, the fact of the matter is you end up with a physical entity or quantity that does not have the reason for its existence in itself. Ultimately, the physical universe reduced in any form cannot explain its own origin. It has to find its explanation outside of itself, which means the first explanation of a universe as we see it has to have something that is non-physical as a first cause. He goes on in endorsing a most recent book that has been written, that we now have the answer, how something can come from nothing.
Let me come on to the I want to ask you about the very title of your book and the idea of something from nothing.
And it's this age-old rehashed quantum vacuum that out of which pops up some kind of a particle that can explain the existence.
You are telling us that matter arose spontaneously out of nothing. Yeah. Which I find an immensely exciting idea, but many people will find it mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling and offensive. I think maybe not as offensive.
To hell with offensive, but
no,
mind-boggling.
No. Well, you're not offended, but I checked my email.
First of all, it's a misuse of what a quantum vacuum is. No quantum theorist actually tells you that a quantum vacuum is nothing. It's not no thing.
And what we've learned is remarkably this question, which is, in the sense of cosmology, in my mind, the last bastion of those people who feel there must be a creator, is the fact that it is plausible, based on everything we now know, that a universe could come from nothing. Now, that doesn't mean it did come from nothing any more than Darwin's argument implied that life absolutely originated by chemistry. We don't know that yet. Similarly, we can't prove that the universe arose from nothing, but the discoveries in physics and cosmology have led us to realize that it's increasingly plausible, and I find that remarkable and worth celebrating.
There is a pattern, there is the subatomic activity that is going on, so it's not nothing. But suppose it is nothing, meaning no thing whatsoever. What does that do to atheism? I thought atheism's entire definition was everything that is matter. It is a materialistic framework from start to finish. But if the starting point is nothing, then it's not a materialistic framework, it's nothing. And if you're starting from nothing to explain everything, then why not end up in nothing, including meaning?
Is this remarkable fact that nothing is unstable, that empty space is unstable. The laws of quantum mechanics, combined with gravity, will tell you that if you have empty space there, and you wait long enough, particles will be created. And if you wait long enough, empty space will always produce a universe full of matter. And it's not a scam, There's no violation of energy conservation. It's from the fact that gravity can have negative energy as well as positive energy. And so, nothing is unstable. And in fact, that's the first answer to why there's something rather than nothing, is that nothing's unstable.
He's making something out of nothing, making it appear to be nothing, out of which he wants to build everything. It violates the very fundamental starting point of atheism.
Now, the problem, of course, of saying that is people say, that's not nothing. You know, that's not, and you know, and it's an interesting problem, because when I've discussed this with theologians and philosophers, some of them, and you ask, you know, what's nothing? And my argument is that these are scientific questions, not philosophical or theological ones. And I think the nothing that Aristotle would have had, or say Thomas Aquinas, or any of the people who first asked why is there something rather than nothing, that nothing would have been an eternal empty void, namely empty space. But once I argue that empty space can create something, then immediately I'm told that's not nothing.
Yeah.
And then I show that space itself can be created from nothing, and then I'm told that's not nothing. And then I say, well, and because there are still laws of physics. And then I argue that, in fact, the laws of physics, for the reasons we've discussed, the anthropic principle, there may be many universes, and it's quite likely that even the laws of physics themselves arose by accident when the universe was created. So even the laws aren't there. And I'm told that's not nothing. And the definition of theologians, I think, for nothing is that from which only God can create something. And I find that as sort of content-free, although I guess I think I say in the book that you know, maybe I'm not fit to talk about nothing because theologians and philosophers are experts in nothing.
That was Lawrence Krauss, real cool guy. So I gave some of the fallacies away. How many could you spot? Comment below, let me know what you untangled. And thanks for watching.
You know, the opponents of the Christian faith are coming out with both barrels loaded.